having done the sort of the more general market background in the opening debate there, we're now going to, in this session before lunch, have two debates, one around consumer to start with and one around the business market, on the basis that we are always trying to look at that balance of supply and demand. So what are we trying to address in the consumer market and in the business market? So we have three presentations in this section. And are you starting off?
Yeah, okay. So the first session that we have now is about 5G. Okay, everyone's talking about it. It's live. There are services actually available all over the world. But we're going to be talking about whether 5G actually transforms the consumer engagement opportunity. Is it really going to radically transform the relationship that telcos have with their consumer customers? And first up, we have Rosalind Singleton, who is the chair of the UK5G Advisory Board. So, Ros, welcome to the stage. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ros.
Thanks, Graham. So I'm very old-fashioned. I have paper with me because I find my screen goes dead at the worst of times. So you'll all know that over the last few years, we've all realised that classical economics is, I'm going to say bunkum, because I think it's probably still too early in the day for swearing. And just like that, I'm also going to say that I think consumers are massively overrated. So they just are. They've jumped the shark. They've gone too far at this point. So connectivity is power for everyone, whether it's electricity or roads. All those advances in connectivity have moved society, GDP, living standards along really well over the years. Obviously, phone networks, you know, when they first came along, and satellites also transformed the way we wage wars, the way we talk to people, the way we run elections, and the way we deal with propaganda. One thing that many of you may have read somewhere is that there are lots of key indicators as to how successful a child will be in its lifetime. So one is obviously the relative wealth of its parents, where they live, that sort of thing. But another key one is having study space. So somewhere, whether it's a desk or a table, or actually a library, you can call your own, you can do your homework, you can read, you can talk to other people and do your learning. And study space could be said to be both physical and virtual. And if you look at libraries dying out, certainly in the UK and in lots of other places over the world, it's less and less available to people who live in less advantaged areas, or very busy households, or households with lots of children, young children, those sorts of things. Having a space you can actually work and lift yourself up and achieve things is just not available. And the internet is actually a big part of that. There's a virtual space where you can study, where you can do your homework. A lot of homework's online nowadays, and those sorts of things. So my argument is that actually we're not consumers, we're citizens, as well as consumers, as well as business people. And as such, 5G will make a difference, because actually it can connect the unconnected. As we build these networks out, and as we aim towards ubiquitous connectivity, billions of devices being connected, all those things, there's no reason why we shouldn't have a social contract as well as a geographic contract for what we cover, for what we do. There's no reason local councils couldn't actually use some of the infrastructure that they allow various mobile networks, private industries, whatever, to build to actually provide connectivity to the digitally disenfranchised. The other things we can do with this sort of connectivity, and at UK5G we've got a number of trials going on at the moment which include things like social care to help deliver anti-loneliness measures to people, again, who would otherwise struggle. So I'm probably going to run a little bit under my 5 minutes here, which is maybe quite unusual.
Doing fine.
Am I? Okay, good. But my basic point is we're not just consumers, we're citizens, and actually that's where 5G has the potential to really make a difference to people's lives, not just in being able to play Fortnite on the bus. That's it.
Fantastic.
So secondly, I'm delighted to welcome to the stage now Nick Greene, the Marketing Director for Three, obviously in the UK, is going to give us a perspective from an operator side. Nick.
So, morning everyone. Someone who spent the last 18 months of his life doing 5G, no, 5G isn't ready yet to engage customers properly. We don't have enough of it, customers don't want it, and I don't think we've done a good enough job of showing them why it's going to be better than what they already have. I happily missed out on 4G. I was working somewhere else, doing something else. I wasn't involved in telecoms at all. I only got to experience that as a consumer, and it wasn't till a number of years later that I suddenly realised that I spent my life working off my phone, streaming videos, connecting with people, doing all sorts of stuff in a way that I couldn't have imagined was possible when I first got a Nokia flip phone in 2001, I think, and I could only do text messages, and I thought having 50 of them was the best thing I could have ever had in the world. The fact that 4G moved the game on almost accidentally, mobile, online services became mobile services. You don't have a mobile-first economy anymore, you have a mobile-only economy first, and 5G is going to give customers a new way of engaging with that. And it is up to the telecoms companies and everyone attached with those to actually demonstrate how this can work for them in different ways. If we are just pipes, I heard someone talking about Deutsche Telekom wanting to be the best pipe. My mobile phone is just a pipe. I have unlimited minutes, I've got unlimited data, I've got unlimited text. I can't differentiate that. The only way of differentiating at the moment is to charge less for it. So what we need to do with 5G is actually do things like Preeti mentioned earlier, is actually you can start charging for latency. Capacity and consistency is what consumers want next. Everybody in this room will have tried to use their phone leaving a train station and stared at it in hopeless frustration while waiting for it to update, and then got to the next station and stared at it again while they wait for it to update. 5G, with its new transmission technologies, its virtualized cores, its ubiquitous coverage, and massive, strong, powerful radios, will allow customers to forget they're actually using a mobile network. And that's where we'll be able to engage with them and actually add value across all our different services. They will forget they're using 5G, they're just using their phone. They won't hunt for Wi-Fi anymore. They're just using their service. And ideally, they'd be able to charge an extra £1 or £1.50 on that service, and actually then allow them to pay for things like email rather than just giving away my data and all my dubious search history for anyone that wants to look at my browser history. And that is how 5G is going to enable customer engagement to sort of get engaged with this again and not just think, well, my phone is crap here, but it's good here, and I'll just use Wi-Fi because that's better. They won't care about any of those things because the capacity and connectivity is so much greater with 5G versus the previous technologies. That's me.
Thank you, Nick. And then finally, our third speaker in this session, our third expert witness is Andrew Coward, CEO of Lumina Networks. Andrew, welcome back.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrew.
Hi, well, good morning. So there's an assumption in the 5G investment model that we're going to unlock a whole load of new revenue streams. And I think when you think about it, we're expecting 10 times more base stations, 10 times more backhaul connections, and so on. And somehow, in some way, that's all going to get paid for by incremental revenue, incremental services. So consumers are in an obvious place where you think that's going to come from. And I would argue that if we're just talking about simply increasing the bandwidth and increasing the coverage that 5G provides, we're not doing anything other than an incremental upgrade from where we are with 4G. So the promise of 5G is that we can kind of divide the network up and segment it and do all these wonderful things that will enable these new services, and latency has been measured as one example of something that's valuable. Well, if you think about what we expect from 5G, you can categorize these new things really into very high demand type applications and very low demand applications. And I think it's quite interesting to look at those two things. So for example, my family has recently bought a new washing machine. The washing machine has Wi-Fi in it today. And it took about an hour and a half for me to configure this washing machine to work on my Wi-Fi network. It was a horrible experience because, well, my utility room doesn't have Wi-Fi coverage. So the expectation we think about from appliances, whether it's washing machines or cars or coffee machines, is that at some point they will all have embedded radio, and they'll all naturally communicate to the network and update that way. And therefore, we'll get incremental subscription licenses from that device. Maybe minimal revenue, but very minimal amount of bandwidth and consumption that plays out on those. It was interesting, I was at a conference last week in Vienna, and the topic there was the fact that a lot of those devices that exist today are actually on the 2G network, because that's all that they need. And the cost of 2G radio is so cheap that it makes much more sense to put 2G into those devices, even today, than to go for a 4G device or a 5G kind of chipset. So if we're going to succeed in 5G on the consumer appliance side, then we have to get the cost points down very radically for that radio to play out. It was interesting last week, the assumption or conclusion was it's going to be easier to turn off 3G than it is to turn off 2G because of these IoT-type devices. But let's look at the more exciting things, the high-performance, high-requirement types of services, low latency. So things like augmented reality and gaming, things that can consume a high amount of bandwidth with maybe a dedicated type of appliance or device. A car also kind of plays into that. You want very low latency of those things. I think Preeti mentioned earlier something like a 10 millisecond round-trip delay, or something like that. And that absolutely plays out, but you've got to think about all the other things that are going to add latency into those services. And when we think about the network design, we talked a little earlier about digitization and automation. Well, for those things that then process that packet, there's an ability to, or a danger of adding a massive amount of latency as we go through this virtualized architecture. So for each appliance or each virtual instance of something you put things through, you're going to delay every network switch, every firewall. And so these things have to be tuned very, very carefully, because it turns out that if you put things through 4 or 5 devices, it's not the distance away from the consumer that's going to make a difference with this. It's the fact you've got all these extra things that have to run through. And I'll give an example of how that's playing out today. So Stadia, which is the Google gaming service, which is obviously not right at the edge. It's in some distant data center. Google actually claim they will have negative latency on those services. Now, that actually means that they're going back in time, if you think about it. But what they've done very cleverly, I think, is 2 things. Make sure that the systems themselves have got the absolute minimal latency. There's very little in it. And then secondly, that they're predicting what you're going to do. So presumably, when you fire that gun, it's going to know what you normally do and how you normally expect to play out, and what should normally happen. It's kind of going to get ahead of you. So some of this is going to be required as we think about all these other services. So just think about augmented reality. I shift my head a little bit, and if there's a massive delay, then you know you're going to feel sick when that happens. And to just think about delay, look at my picture on the screen here, and you'll note that I'm slightly behind on television. And that's a transcoding delay. So you can see the impact even in this room with technology having an impact on things. And then finally, to make all these new services happen, we talked about network slicing earlier, all of this requires automation and digitization. And where Lumina spends its time is trying to get all this stuff, the new stuff, the old stuff, controlled and automated so it kind of all comes together for that network slice or that unique service delivery. Thank you.
Thank you. After you, Mr. Wild.
Thank you.
Thanks, I need to know where the steps are.
You okay? Good?
Good,
right.
We're up.
Marvellous.
So, Greene, do we have a motion?
We do have a motion.
I think this is your favourite motion, isn't it?
The motion is, is it displayed on the screen? No, it isn't. Oh, yes, it is. It's up there. For consumers, so this is quite controversial, this motion here. For consumers, 5G is not even another G. And I'm speaking for this motion, and Chris is speaking against it. So, let me start then. What am I going to say? Okay, right, well, look, we've all been hearing for an awfully long time, haven't we, about the benefits of 5G and how, in actual fact, it's going to be, more than just a normal mobile technology. It's going to be absolutely transformative, and so on and so on. I put it to you, ladies and gentlemen, I put it to you that actually that is a load of codswallop. You've seen trials, I'm sure, on the internet, and every vendor has done one of 5G, downloading a gigabit per second when the handset is 50 centimeters from the base station, and there's only one user, okay? So I think what's going to happen is that when you have a large population of 5G users, not just one or two, but hundreds, thousands inside a particular cell site, some of them FWA users, so they're actually using home broadband, some of them mobile users, then actually the experience that those people get will be no better than 4G. And in fact, as they use more and more data, the situation is only going to get worse. So I think, I put it to you, ladies and gentlemen, that the telecoms industry is simply battling to keep up with a massive increase in demand from data, for data from consumers. And actually, all of the other things you've heard about slicing and blah, 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 forget all of that, right? It's just about speed. That's all everybody ever talks about with 5G. And the speed in real life for the average person in 2 or 3 years' time will be no better than it is now. And so I urge you to support the motion when you vote. Show me the green card. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Graham. So, ladies and gentlemen, Graham always very eloquently points out these things and finds these little nuggets. But I think, if I might take you back to the opening debate, the target for the telecoms industry is not just around the mobile piece, but it's around that combination. And the delivery, why it will be new generation, is because the CTOs, CIOs, the C-level people around the boardroom table within the world's telcos are looking at this as an opportunity to bring together, under the banner of 5G, all of the things which will help us communicate in the long run. Hence, we discussed about the densification, about the need for more fibre and backhaul, but also to get to the customers. But also the unlicensed piece. What we don't want to do is what I think somebody mentioned in the opening comments, Nick, where you're trying to get on the next Wi-Fi network. Actually, the tube example in London is the best example, when by the time you've connected, you've gone to the next tube station. But actually, by bringing those things together and synchronizing and using licensed and unlicensed spectrum and making sure where it fits in with the fibre environment, that we do have 5G, it's the bringing together of what the telecoms industry actually puts in front of all of us as consumers, as business, or as Ross says, as citizens, to actually support that broader economic value. So 5G is changing the way that the industry is thinking, and it will change the experience for the consumers in the long run. Now let's put a caveat on the long run for that. Graham, do we want to ask our experts any further comments?
Absolutely. Would anybody like any of our three experts like to contribute, or onto one side or the other of this debate?
Actually, one thing that did occur to me, Andrew, in your comment. So you said as you pull the trigger. Well, surely if Google have got ahead of time, you'll already be dead. Someone's already shot you.
Well, presumably, and that's already been predicted in the
AI
algorithms.
Yeah, true. Good point.
Well, so I've got a quick question for you, Andrew. When you connected up your washing machine to Wi-Fi, did it start what does it do? Sort of start abusing you on Twitter? I mean, what's it?
Actually, it has. I have an app, and it keeps telling me that my washing machine needs to be cleaning itself.
Right. Okay.
And it does that repeatedly. It's actually
okay. It sounds quite Orwellian.
So,
anyway, there we are.
And Ros, can I come back to something you said? And I think this is very, very important. And I know if Mansour had been with us, he would have talked about this. The way in which the regulation, the way in which we get services to all those people, those citizen services you talked about, do we need a tweak on the regulatory framework in the UK specifically, or more generally?
I have to be a little bit careful about what I say. So I would say that we probably need significantly more than a tweak. I do think making some of the spectrum available for shared use effectively, so you can basically apply for certain bands of spectrum, get to use them, is a really good move forward. But I actually think the demand for data and services is going to actually drive, if you just leave it to pure commercials, it will drive a number of new services to come up that are going to start eating operators' lunch. And actually, so really 5G in itself, like just the technology that the operators are rolling out, will end up being quite meh for most consumers, but some of the other things that will happen, and for the consumers that aren't in cities, for consumers that are part of communities, for different ways of delivering things, I think actually it could end up being quite exciting because of the capabilities it provides rather than necessarily just new radio.
Because we did actually at a different event float this notion of giving the NHS its own MVNO license, and actually for the good of the country. And I think I wonder if we'll start to see some of that going forward. But that's perhaps for a different debate. And Nick, the question that occurred to me when you were talking, within an organisation like Three, who's more excited The CEO, the CMO, the CTO. Who's the most excited party?
So working with Shardy on a daily basis, the CMO is definitely the most excited person in the building. Generally, it's also about 5G as well. So the levels that they want to achieve on this, for Three ourselves, we're in a very good position with what we can deliver. So everyone in the company is excited to actually, deliver on the promise of what it could be, because we come from a position that is so far behind everyone else. So getting parity and then, ideally, technical advantage is very exciting.
But the thing for me, I suppose, on that is that 5G is this massive marketing tool, right? So the hype machine behind it has meant that actually people have a vague awareness of what it is anyway. So it's not really necessarily about delivering a service or delivering 5G. It's just about the fact it is something that sells more phones and sells more contracts. And certainly that's very much the way I see the marketing that's being done at the moment is as somebody who's not working for any particular company at the moment, so can say what she likes. It's very much, it's really just about trying to sell more stuff. So whether you say, we've got 5G if you're here, or we're 5G ready, or whatever it happens to be, it's just buy more stuff from us at a slightly higher price than our 4G. You'll mainly be on 4G, but we'll be getting better margins out of it. Nothing is different. It's exactly the same.
Right, but outside of that hype cycle, for that washing machine example, it doesn't actually matter to the consumer whether it's on 2G or 5G, as long as it just works. Even LG are not going to put a 5G logo on that washing machine. It doesn't make any sense, right? But the ubiquity of it will play through.
Yeah, but it doesn't. To the consumers, it's meh.
Yeah.
Okay. Right, I think we should open the floor up to questions and comments.
There's a man in a red jumper apparently who wants to ask.
Oh, it's me, Howard Watson.
So Ross tells me.
Howard Watson, who has refused to play the bass for us today, but we are still
I won't be doing
to
that.
ask a question.
Well, I need to refute the fact that Chris accused me of being the copper guy earlier on.
No, that wasn't what I said. I was misquoted. I said I didn't allow for copper as well. We shouldn't.
But anyway, actually, I think I'm a bit neutral on this, so I've got to think about how I vote, actually, because I think from a CTO perspective, and everybody in our building is excited about 5G, and whether it's the consumer CEO, Mark Alera, the enterprise CEO, Dre McQuaid, or myself, and I think we've technologies in telecoms, we're lucky in some respects that we can ride waves of demand to improve the underlying technical capability. So I remember, it's quite a long time ago, but I remember when in telephone networks we were worried about busy hour being at 1 p.m. in the afternoon, driven by business customers. And that, of course, rapidly shifted when dial-up internet came along to being in the evening. And ever since then, we've been building networks to essentially ride the peak created by consumers. And that is still an insatiable peak. I think Mike Sherman mentioned earlier today that last week we increased our peak by another 4 terabits per second on the back of Premier League football from Amazon. And I think what 5G does is it allows us to continue to feed that somewhat insatiable usage requirement for consumers, for which we are certainly hopeful that they will pay a little bit more. And on the back of that, it allows me to take advantage of significant, factor of a quarter, network economics in using that really, scarce spectrum resource that we talked about by getting 5G new radio out into the network. But I actually think the real 5G benefit, and we all talk about this and we're still grappling with ways to bring it to life, is it will absolutely come from not from the humans who are consuming as consumers or citizens every evening. My view is that what 5G enables us to do, particularly when we get the core built as well, is whereas today network differentiation is driven by coverage and capacity, it is rapidly moving to being driven by reliability, latency, and zero-touch automation. And I think the evidence for that is that by 2030, there'll be 400 million devices in the UK and only 70 million humans. And so the network, I think, will effectively have to accommodate from an architectural point of view the need of all those devices. So yes, I think consumers will drive that now. I think it will then shift to private and public sector who will be running most of the devices, and consumers will still benefit from that because they'll get a great network on the back of that experience. So that's how I sort of see it evolving.
Super, thank you very much, Howard. So Andrew's washing machine will be tweeting him mercilessly over a 5G network in future.
It's better than the fridge.
Yeah.
But I think part of that is interesting, isn't it? That all of that connectivity, what you described there, Howard, is actually will become invisible to the customer. So that's a branding challenge. I think that's one of the issues that we face with the future communication services environment. Is how do we attach value to it? Because the things that we're doing may well be buying from other people, whether it's Amazon Prime you mentioned for the football or Netflix or other things. So it doesn't change that issue. I think it puts more pressure on the people, the CTO building and driving the networks. But making it invisible, it's almost the invisible contributor to the digital economy.
But don't you think people will start buying redundancy? So, if you need to have your phone on all the time so you don't have to talk to your kids at dinner, then, you need to maybe have a backup plan for that if you've got, let's say, fibre.
We think that one of the opportunities is convergence between fixed and mobile networks to give exactly that. So if you can have a hub in your house that's connected to fibre and to 4G or 5G, and getting that resilience we think is quite critical.
They already have devices very similar to that in various places in Africa, actually, that do satellite 4G,
But to Howard's point on the zero touch, it's the heavy lift in this, in my view, isn't the radio, because the telco industry knows how to do that. What hasn't been done before is the full automation of these things, so that dynamically for the 400 million devices that we'll get in the UK, washing machines included, that they will have their own slice, they'll have their own dynamic provisioning enabled. If you think about everything we do today, it's pretty static. So that process of being able to automate everything is a difficult job, and very today it's just very siloed. So there's a lot of work to do for that 5G core to be made a reality.
And we will touch upon that after lunch.
Super. Okay, more questions, comments from the floor? Yeah. Yes, this gentleman down here, just wait for the microphone, please.
Andy McLeod, used to be at Vodafone.
Oh, yes, Andy.
I think I'd just like to pick up on Andrew's point, because I think, all of the hype has really focused around the radio piece of this, and I'd like to pick up on, I don't think that's where the action is, in the sense of the difference, right? So to the motion is that actually the radio part of this probably isn't another G. I mean, most of the gains don't come out of something that's new. It comes out of massive MIMO, comes out of stacked up, different way of stacking up the frequency, comes out of a lot more frequency in terms of the numbers that people are quoting is the difference between what we have today, 4G, 2x2 MIMO on 20 megahertz, and the numbers most of you see are massive MIMO numbers on 40 plus megahertz, right? And so that's where you get a lot of the gain from. I think going back into the core, I think that's where the revolution is, because the core today is definitely not fit for IoT, right? And it's definitely not fit for consumer IoT, right? And then the automation angle is a complete piece on top of that. So I think, that's where the difference will come from. Other than that, it's an economics play, as Howard said, right? Because the economics does make it somewhat cheaper. The spectral efficiency is better in new radio, right? And massive MIMO. And so that for the carrier that plays to this insatiable desire for demand. But I don't think it's a new G in that space. I think when we get to the core, it probably does justify being a new G.
Which way are you going to vote, though, Andy? That's the key question. You're sitting on.
I haven't got a clue.
Okay, all right, fine. Good. Yes, gentleman over there. Just keep your hand up, and Ross can see where you are.
Great. Ian Fogg from Open Signal. I think one of the striking things about the industry we're in is that every few years there's a new 3GPP standard, there's improvements in the connectivities, there's improvements in the devices, but only every 10 years or so do we have the opportunity to market to consumers and say, this is something different, this is something you should pay more for. And if you think back over the last 10 years, we've seen rising data consumption, we've got pressure on a number of devices. 10 years ago, people used to spend maybe 50 to 150 euros average selling price on their phone. Now they spend $1,000, hundreds of dollars, but all that's gone to the device guys, not to the telcos, because we've done a bad job of explaining why connectivity matters, why you should spend a bit more on it. I think we've got like a telecom climate emergency on this, in that this is our opportunity. This G is our opportunity once every 10 years to say to everyone, this is a really cool thing. This is going to set us up for the next 10 years. And that's going to help us with IoT. It's going to help us with rising consumer devices, with consumption, everything else. But we have to kind of make the most of this G. We mustn't underplay it. We're just at the start of the era. We have to use this as our opportunity to say, this is a really exciting thing. And if we don't do it, Howard's rising number of devices, rising data consumption, means consumers are going to suffer lots of pain because their speeds will slow down. Yeah, Dean.
Couple of quick ones. One is, all the coolest stuff about 5G probably won't work indoors unless you've got a dedicated in-building system. And the other thing is, I'm getting 5 milliseconds on the Wi-Fi in a crowded conference room right now.
But hopefully not everybody's playing Fortnite, it's just you, Dean.
What are you playing?
Yes, lady here at this table. Thank you.
Hi, Beth Cohen from Verizon. I will admit that Verizon is probably driving the hype cycle, very much so. But that does not mean that I am against 5G. I think it's, in my mind, and this is my opinion, 5G is a technology that's essential for the telecoms to drive efficiency and improve the pipe. But in terms of the hype to the consumer, I would say it's a technology looking for a solution. But in terms of tech, I think where 5G is going to really shine is at the business level, at the enterprise level.
Okay.
So with IoT and medical and all sorts of other use cases that I know we've discussed, that's where it's going to really shine.
That's the next debate, Beth. We'll come
Yeah,
back.
thank you. That's a good one.
Good lead.
Next, any more questions? Any more comments? Yes, gentleman over there.
Risk chucking it this time. Yeah, so getting back to the motion, for consumers, 5G is not even another G. I think you can argue that both ways. There is some marketing benefit about slapping the label on it. This is why T-Mobile in the US has done 5G and 600 megahertz so that they can have the 5G icon light up on subscribers' phones. I think there's some short-term appeal, albeit superficial. But I think that what 5G actually does for the consumer is enable something that they do want in the longer term, and that is unlimited usage. So we've seen already some linkage between early 5G services and unlimited. Elisa in Finland came to market with unlimited plans on 5G. Vodafone, interestingly, in the UK and some other European countries, has introduced 5G and unlimited at the same time. Now, at the moment, most of the people on Vodafone's plans will not be using 5G. So if you get a Vodafone unlimited plan, the max plan, as they call it, it lets you use 5G if you've got a 5G phone and you've got coverage, but chances are you haven't. What you're getting that plan for is unlimited coverage, unlimited usage, beg your pardon. But in the long term, 5G is critical to that because only 5G gives the operator the capacity to sustain unlimited usage. So then it becomes not a customer-facing benefit, it becomes an enabler of a customer-facing benefit. And I think it's important to understand that transition from the superficial short term to the underlying long term.
Super. Thank you very much.
Contentious.
Yes. Gentleman here. Oh, right. No, go for it. Sorry, but yeah, go for it.
Hi. Yeah, just a quick comment on the value comment that was made by Michael from BT on the first panel, and then Howard, also from BT, made the comment about, we hope that consumers will want to pay a bit more for it. And I think that's the crux of the matter, because at the moment, I haven't heard anything in this room that would convince me why a consumer would want to want to pay more for 5G. I think, we all like to have a bit more speed on our phones, but I think that it's going to be really, really difficult for people to actually want to pay more unless there is some app, killer app if you like, which means that they absolutely need that 5G. So, you hear about XR and VR, and probably it's going to be gaming, so Fortnite has been mentioned here and there, but I'd like to see a lot more creativity coming out of the sort of use cases for consumers to convince myself to vote against this motion. So I'm going to vote for, because I think that for consumers it is just another G at the moment, and I don't see any reason that anyone's put forward here on why they would want to pay more.
Take issue with one thing on that, which is that it may not be that the consumer for the handset pays more, but that augmented reality headset that you get, or those glasses that you buy, will have their own subscription. And so you're now paying for the phone, and you're paying in the same way you might pay for a tablet today for extra data, you're paying for that extra device. So the plethora of different devices that we might end up with might each individually now adding more to the revenue stream for them.
So the telco has to make sure then that they get a proportion of that extra revenue that comes with that device.
That's right, and it's substituted for what would have gone onto Wi-Fi historically.
Broader spend. How are we doing for time, Greg?
Yeah, so we're okay. We've got about 6 minutes left. We're going with the lady down here at this table.
Thanks. Ildiko Vancha from the OpenStack Foundation. So I'm not with an operator, neither do I supply any devices to this 5G stuff, but I'm a consumer and I travel a lot. And just the experience of basic connectivity differs a lot around the globe, per country, per region in that country. And not to mention data roaming sometimes is stealing money out of my pocket because I pay a lot and it doesn't even work. So when it comes to 5G, I'm really happy that my washing machine is only connected to power and water, and that's it. So on my personal end, I don't know when I will want to consume this AR, VR stuff. I'm a pretty old-fashioned person, but when it comes to traveling around the globe and not being able to make a decent voice call of any kind, or not always being able to reliably receive text message of any kind, I kind of wonder that while we are focusing on AR, VR, and washing machines, do we also focus on enhancing basic level of connectivity of any G? Because sometimes my phone says edge and not in the new school way, meaning that it's connected to something that will not do anything for me and I'm still paying money.
Yeah.
Yep.
Good point.
Indeed. We've never paused before. That's the first.
Right, so
Get an interview with that lady.
We're going to go with the right-hand side here with the gentleman with the blue shirt.
Last one, I think.
With 5G, will allow you, madam, to take your washing machine with you on your travels.
Virtually, anyway.
Absolutely. Anyway, so yes, carry on.
Yeah, I mean, linking this comment, sorry, Steve from NetNumber, linking this back to the previous motion as well about the concern about telcos being further up the value chain and becoming more relevant to consumers and businesses, in fact. Why are we still insistent that, from a marketing perspective, telcos are positioning this as 5G? Because you talk to any consumer that's not in our industry, they don't care. They don't know what 5G is. 5G is just a term that's been given, a label that's been given. So they don't know that it means extra speed, it means low latency, it means better connectivity. They don't know that. They say, oh yeah, I'm buying a 5G. So what are you buying? Well, it's a 5G, isn't it? That's what I'm buying. So at what point are we going to change the way that we market these services so they appeal to consumers and not just to people that understand the technology? Because, and that's the only way you're going to start differentiating, by saying something similar to some of the conversations from over there. You've got to market this based on the appeal it will have to consumers if it's going to be relevant to them, and not just the technological terminology that we all know. And that's something I think that's fundamentally got to change to be successful and move telcos up that value chain by starting to talk about the value it provides and not just the technology that underpins it.
Super. Thank you very much.
It's interesting, isn't it, that in the discussion as it sort of gets drawn out, the initial activity where all of the promotion, whether it's in the US or Korea when the first service is launched, or Swisscom launching the first one in Europe, that actually it's the marketing people got all that going on, whereas actually behind the scenes, getting that call ready for what has to happen in the future is really where the industry needs to change. So Graham, should we get Mr.
It's time for a
Parsons up?
vote, yes. So let's get our impartial adjudicator up here.
Come, Mr. P.
Look at him move.
Oh, you're here. Good.
Look at him move.
Look at him move. Well, if I could.
I was following Andy's washing machine on Twitter. Yeah. Just a quick update. Actually, 48 followers, not bad for @fullyloaded. Unfortunately, it's got involved in a vicious Twitter spat with your microwave, so I had to stop following. Some of the language was appalling. Right, now, those in favour of the motion, get ready to raise your paddle with the green part in front of it, and those against with the red part. Vote now, please. Oh, I would say that is 2/3 at least for the Greens, so the motion is carried again.
Well done, mate.
There we are.
Great motion.
Thank you very much to our speakers.
And thank you, Ross. Thank you, Nick. And thank you.